I'm Dave Whittle. I'm the Associate Director, IT Operations and Infrastructure at the University of Guelph, and I also have responsibility for the security team. So I was brought on to the university about a year and a half ago, and part of the reason the university was attracted to bringing me on board was my previous experience at BlackBerry, building a security roadmap, architecture, and plan, and vision, and executing on that plan. So over the past year and a half, I've put in place, with some help, a team, a roadmap and strategy, and we're starting to execute on that strategy. And joining me today is Stephen Willem, who's our Manager Information Security, who's responsible for executing on that plan, and Gerrit, who is our IT Security Officer, who's been at the university quite a while, and his responsibility encompasses risk policy awareness, and we're putting a lot of emphasis as part of our strategy on education and awareness, which you'll hear about today. Now, I do have to apologize. I'm not quite my usual self today, as Ted knows. I have a 2-year-old in preschool, a 4-year-old in JK. I work at a university, and if there's a bug going around, we get it. So I've actually been hit with it, hit our house yesterday, so I'm a little under the weather today, so I apologize for that. I'm usually a little bit more lively and chipper than I am, so we'll try and do the best we can. And Steve and Gerrit are going to help me out today. So we're going to talk a little bit about a few different areas. So we'll talk about the threat landscape and what in particular we're seeing at the University of Guelph around threats. As we all know, higher education is certainly an eye-opener for me, is very different from the corporate world. Very distributed, open, flat, a lot of challenges, culture that you're dealing with, and people are some of the biggest challenges around security. So we'll talk a little bit about some of the things that we've seen over the past year at the university. Steve is going to talk to you about some of the things we're executing on around our security roadmap. One of the first things I did when I came on board was put together a strategy and a plan, and with that comes an ask for money. And we've been very fortunate that we have a 5-year plan. People, process, and technology is very similar to what I did at BlackBerry. Is really, you'd be surprised when I joined BlackBerry. My boss handed me our security roadmap, and it was 1 page, and it had IDM written on it. And that was it. So that was a starting point. Not a very good starting point either for those who've done IDM. But anyhow, so same situation from a maturity level of 1 to 10. University of Guelph, we were 1, if that. And many, many challenges around that. And some of that is funding, but we're very fortunate to get support from our Board of Governors and our Audit Committee and our VP of Finance to get some funding behind the program. And I know Dave Shipley talked a little bit about the investments they're going to be making, a couple of $1 million. Our plan around people, technology, and process is about $5 million over 5 years. So pretty significant spend for higher education, and that's with being efficient. So we're not about buying the biggest and best technology. We're about buying the right fit. And you're going to hear about integration today, too. Integration is absolutely key for us. So we're looking at solutions that talk to each other, that will automate response, because if one thing we learned in security is you can't rely on people all the time. We miss things. So we got to look at building some of that capability into the technology. And you're starting to see ecosystems that are building up that integrate. We're a big Intel security partner, and Intel has a framework called DXL, for example, and they're bringing other vendors into that framework. So, for example, if your antivirus has a file and it doesn't know if it's good or bad, and most times it doesn't, it can send it to something, and that something might be an ATD, for example. And advanced threat detection can analyze it and then send a result back to the endpoint, but not just the endpoint telling it whether it's good or bad, but send it to your firewall, send it to your SIM, send it to your network access control. And in turn, they can take action automatically. So that integration exists today. So NAC can, for example, based on that information, quarantine an endpoint. And then it can go, after it's quarantined that particular endpoint automatically, it can go figure out where else does that file exist on the network that it hasn't executed, and then remove it. So that's what you're seeing, the trend in security. We've been talking about integration and automation in security for a couple of years now, but the solutions are actually coming to market. And it's our hope that vendors continue to work together to enable that and enable security for customers like the University of Guelph. Awareness, which Gerrit is going to talk about, is absolutely critical for us. and we put a lot of emphasis around education and awareness. We've redid our website, make it easy, lots of content, easy to find, put on latest phishing campaigns going on, tutorials. So we've done a lot of work with that. And we actually, one of the first things I did was actually put on a security roadshow. So we bring some of our key partners and vendors on site. We asked them to throw in a little bit of money for free pizza and pop for the students. And we get a great turnout of students coming through, and they ask really good questions, and they learn about security, and we do a little quiz and all sorts of things, and Gerrit will talk a little bit about that as well, but very effective way of engaging with students around security. So some of the challenges, Dave Shipley talked a little bit about this, but higher education, very flat, very open networks, lack of visibility into what is connecting to your network and what is going on across the network. And those are challenges that we've had to deal with and looking to address. There's valuable data. Department of Homeland Security does a lot of work with U.S. institutions, but they'll tell you finance, student information systems, research data are all targets, right? We have to be aware of that, and we've seen attacks against those different areas at the University of Guelph. Decentralized IT. So this was a real head scratcher for me when I came from the corporate world, a very big, large enterprise, into higher education. But it's the norm, right? So our centralized unit, CCS, we have a managed desktop service. It's optional, and we do cost recovery. So if you want to come on with your staff or faculty onto that service, we charge you an annual fee. Web services, we have a central web infrastructure. We charge you to use it, and it's optional. Those are considerable challenges when you're looking to get consistency and security across the campus that we have to deal with. And I think that the mentality is starting to change. We're dealing with many, many years of culture here on how things have been done. And I think security is going to be a driver for some of that change because we are seeing more and more threats and compromises. Lots of devices, a large part of our user base is students, right? We're at 22,000 undergrads, about a couple of thousand graduates, and 4,000 staff and faculty. So students connect to the same network as staff and faculty, right? And they're bringing all the latest devices on. So certainly that's poses challenges for us. And we try to engage with students. It's really about securing the human, right? And engaging with the students to educate them on what a phishing attempt looks like. And we do a lot of phishing quizzes with our students and that sort of thing. Breaches get high visibility, so students, staff, faculty, senior admin, if that network goes down, they notice. And we've had a couple of incidents where the network was taken down by a security breach. And it's not good for our reputation. Fortunately, it doesn't get a lot of external press, but internally, as far as damage and reputation, as far as being reliable for our students, staff, and faculty, it's a concern. Large turnover of students, so we look at mechanisms on how we can engage with students on an annual basis, and Security Roadshow is one of the elements that we leverage to do that. I talked about open from a logical network perspective, but physically too. So in the corporate world, you need badge access and pictures and cards to get into certain areas. Well, anybody can walk right through and right past my office during regular business hours at the university. So we've seen some physical theft, and Steve and Gerrit are working to put together some policies. There's really a lack of policy, just real fundamental policies, like a network access policy, the basic fundamentals you need to do to get onto the network. Patch, right? Potentially encryption if you're touching sensitive data, things like that, and be up to date with all your software patches. Clean desk policy. So this is going to be a biggie for us, right? So don't keep stuff away and out in the open. If you're not at your desk, make sure it's either via Kensington lock or it's tucked away and locked. It's your screen is locked. All those sort of basic things, and we're trying to address that. And we have seen where laptops were just left out and taken because the very open nature of anybody can walk around in most of the areas in the university, including where senior admin are. Okay, so we couple of things we do there. Clean access policy is going to help us, encouraging people to lock things away. And if a laptop does get taken, that we're really pushing out the encryption, so we don't have to declare a privacy breach. And that's helped us in a couple of instances over the past year. So we have seen issues with copyright violations, typically involving students. We have seen a lot of spam. We do have email filtering in place, captures a lot of that, but still some gets through. Denial of service attacks, yes, but coming from the inside, not necessarily the outside. So we've seen compromised servers on campus. Again, part of that distributed IT environment I talked about, not centrally managed, not patched, up to date, compromised, and launching internal DDoS attacks against the inside interfaces of our firewall, for example. And it takes a while to find that because you don't have visibility into everything or manage everything connecting to your environment. It's hard to find where that source is. But we found it. And when we got there, we looked at the malware, and it had been sitting there for probably at least a year, maybe two. Phishing is a big issue for us. I think phishing is a big issue for everyone, not just higher ed. We've seen some sophisticated phishing attacks, and we're looking at really educating the users so they can identify what a phishing attempt looks like. And some of the technology we're going to be looking at down the road will allow us to do our own phishing campaigns, so we can help people see what a phishing attempt looks like. And you know, the best thing to learn is to see what it looks like to get compromised, right? But it has caused us some challenges. We do see a lot of phishing attacks on the campus. Malware. So yes, we are finding a lot of malware, and we're finding more as we put more technology in place. And certainly, when I joined the university, I warned everybody as senior admin that the problem is going to get and look a lot worse before it gets better, because our goal for the first year of our security roadmap is around visibility. So we're putting in a SIM. We've recently procured a SIM with Intel Security, and we're in the process of putting that in place. We've just procured a network access control solution from Forescout Technologies, and those solutions are going to give us a lot of visibility into what's going on, and we're going to discover a lot of very bad things. Just in our pilots with this technology, within 24 hours, we discovered a lot of issues. So it's going to cause us a lot of work to begin with, but we need that visibility so we can start moving from that being reactive approach to being proactive and actually stopping what the problems are. We have seen ransomware. It's made its way on campus. We've had some researchers have lost all their research because of it, and totally preventable. In these cases, being part of our centrally managed desktop service would have prevented it. We had some tools in place to prevent some types of ransomware, not all, which would have caught it, but also leveraging our central file storage for backup. People kept everything local, no backup, and we won't pay the ransom. So 6 months of data lost, and could have prevented it for paying, you know, essentially what amounts to about $300 a year to be a managed desktop customer. So this is interesting. So external data breaches. So we actually have to be very cognizant of these and take action on these, because a lot of our campus customers use their University of Guelph email address to access these sites. So what else do we have to assume? Well, they're probably using their University of Guelph password as well, right? So we have to have a conversation with them. We have to lock the account, and we have to get them to change their password. So, you know, it's not just about what's going on internally to the campus. We have to be aware of what's happening externally as well. Web servers. So I talked again, you know, back to the distributed nature of IT. So we have seen web servers compromised on campus, some mainly in research areas, but some of these research studies can be pretty sensitive in nature. And even though we think in some cases they were just trying to just, you know, not necessarily steal any data, but just be a pain for us, we can't necessarily prove that the data wasn't compromised. That's a big issue, especially if it involves a study like a family health study or something like that. That's a big, big issue for us. And we've certainly seen some other challenges like that. And certainly could have been prevented if the system was managed and maintained and patched. We would see a lot of issues go away with proper patch management and just putting some proper security controls and having a support contract around some of that web infrastructure. And again, people don't think about that. They look at the cost. We tend to be a little bit more expensive than some of the cheaper external houses for doing web development, but they don't do all the things that we do. And that's certainly one of the things that Steve and Gerrit are going to be looking at, is putting together some policies around, if you're going to stick a web server in our network, it needs to adhere to some certain guidelines. You know, same sort of idea with the network access policy. If you're going to connect to our network, you need to adhere to some basic fundamentals. I talked a little bit earlier about physical computer theft. So Ted and Dave talked about this statement, and what I wanted to illustrate here is we've seen a lot of evolution of new technologies, right? Application visibility and control in the next-gen firewalls, sandboxing technology, whether in a dedicated appliance like a FireEye or built into firewalls. Typically, when they get released, they'll come out with some very impressive detection rates for APTs, right, in the 90% plus range. But history has shown us that doesn't stay at those levels. I don't know if any of you know Stuart McClure. So I got to know Stuart quite well when I was at BlackBerry. He, author of Hacking Exposed, and created a company called Foundstone, which he sold to McAfee, became MVM. And I met with Stuart. He's got a new company called Silence, a very innovative endpoint security platform. It's cloud-based, does a lot of analytics type information, sort of similar to the approach that Darktrace is taking, but a different way of doing it in the cloud and then applying it to the endpoint. When I met with him, and last time I met with him was probably about a year and a half ago, they do some very interesting webinars. They pick on FireEye quite a bit, but they will demonstrate how malware gets past next-gen firewalls, gets past sandboxing. And his message to me was, and I certainly adhere to this, is that even if you had, and I'm talking about sandboxing 1.0 because there's some new technology above and beyond this. Next-gen firewalls, you're doing all your endpoint protection, you have sandboxing in place, you're probably going to detect about 65% of APTs. So that's pretty significant investment to get 65%, and that's why education and awareness and securing the human are so important. We are now seeing newer technologies, so you're seeing sandboxing 2.0, a lot of them call them ATD type solutions, and at the University of Guelph, we're certainly looking into those. I think Trend is here, they're talking about their solution. Intel's got a solution that we're looking at. There's others out there as well. And again, they're, at least for now, showing higher detection rates around advanced persistent threats. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how they do, along with new technologies like Darktrace and Silence, which is Stuart McClure's new company, how they do over the next couple of years as far as maintaining those high detection rates. So I wanted to put this up there. This is a slide I got from a Cisco presentation, and this absolutely applies to us. Some of the malware that when we find it, and the one that took down our network for half a day, it had been sitting in an environment dormant at least a year. I think we thought potentially 2 years until we discovered it. So hacking is not that difficult anymore. You can hire a hacker to do everything for you. There's companies that have call centers. If you're coming from somewhere Eastern Europe or Asia and your English isn't very good and you need to deal with a bank, there's companies that have call centers that will do the transaction for you and take a cut. DDoS as a service, $7 an hour here. I've heard that rate's even gone down, but you can hire a company to DDoS somebody for you. And if you're not happy with the level of service you're getting with that DDoS, a lot of them have call centers. You can call and complain. So it's big business. You can buy exploits, you can buy malware. Obviously, we know credit cards are probably the most visible thing that we're aware of as far as monetizing the hacking industry. I can't remember the exact details, but somebody told me Target, I think 200,000 credit cards were sold within the first week for $20 each. That's $4 million in a week. So gives you a bit of perspective on how easy it is to launch an attack now. You don't need the skills anymore. You can just pay somebody to do it for you. So Steve and Gerrit are going to dive into this a little bit more. But what I wanted to share here is we do a lot of information sharing. A nice thing about what was really refreshing for me coming into the higher ed community is everybody works together and shares information and helps each other. Steve and I are actually having a call tomorrow with the CIO at York to sort of share what we're doing. And it's all about helping and facilitating and sharing information. There's a special interest group under CUCIO, which is a Canadian University CIO group. Everybody shares information around attacks and threats and what they're seeing. It's very helpful. We do use some publicly available threat intelligence, but also, as I mentioned, we did recently procure Intel Security's Enterprise Security Manager SIM, and with that, we also procured their Global Threat Intelligence, which we hope will help us out quite a bit as well. I talked about the roadmap. A roadmap's not just technology. It's defining your people and process. So our roadmap talked about all the new positions and roles that we needed to bring on and what our team looked like. And Steve's in the process of executing on that. One of my first hires coming to university was to convince Steve to come over. Steve managed the global SOC at BlackBerry. So there's very few things that he hasn't seen. And I needed somebody to come over and operate and get everything running for me. And Steve is setting up her SOC, doing a ton of work around executing on the roadmap. And that roadmap includes people, process, and technology. All three of those working together. And awareness. So Gerrit's going to talk a little about some of the work we're doing around awareness. Absolutely critical in a higher ed environment. We really need to engage with the faculty, engage with the students, and do that in various ways. And we're starting to be very creative on how we do that. We have our security roadshow. We've redone our website. Gerrit actually gets engaged with our research ethics board. So when research requests come in that involve anything that could be ethical or contain PII, Gerrit's got a seat at the table and can help guide them before they actually start executing on that research. So we're really focusing on different ways to get engaged, and Gerrit will talk a bit more about that. Okay, and I'll hand it over to Steve.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave. Hi, everybody. Thanks very much for having us here today. So my name is Steve Willem. I'm the Manager of Information Security at the University of Guelph. Dave's already done a good job of introducing me. So what I'm going to do is just quickly talk about our security roadmap. So I've been with the university for about 10 months now, and I was lucky enough that when I showed up, the roadmap was already started, but more importantly, the objectives were already stated. So I won't go through all of these, but it really comes down to increasing our controls and our capabilities, building our visibility, having processes around incident response, strengthening partnerships. I think that's a really key one there. I think it's been mentioned before, but having those internal relationships with groups on campus is key, and being able to collaborate with those groups, but also external groups, is really important in our environment. Building out the architecture. As Dave mentioned, on a maturity scale, we're very low when we first started out. So we want to be able to develop that architecture and get those capabilities out there to really help us. And finally, the policies, standards, processes, and baselines. So when you boil it all down, it really comes down to we want to move from a reactive state to a proactive state. So our security model right now is built on ad hoc processes. We want to move to documented and repeatable processes. We've got a lot of single-purpose tools, so tools that were brought in for any number of reasons, but they do one thing and they do one thing really well. That's not really going to help us going forward. We need tools that are integrated, that can talk to each other, share data, and really help us going forward. The next one that I think is probably the biggest one is the visibility. Don't really have a lot of visibility as to what's going on our network. It's a big network. There's a lot of people there. We don't know what everybody's doing. So we really need to have full visibility, and that's probably the key to the whole thing. Security awareness, Gerrit's going to talk a little bit about what we're doing there. And then, again, the collaboration, being seen as a partner in this, being an enabler and not a hindrance. We're not the guys that just say no all the time. We're there to help groups. So again, boiling it down, people, process, technology. I think technology is included kind of as the last thing because as technology people, we always look for the shiny new toy, and we think that's going to be the key to it. But I don't think it is. It's not going to solve all of our problems. You can have the greatest tool, but unless you have people, the right people, and processes in place, you're not going to be able to do anything. So the next 3 slides, I'm just going to quickly talk about what we're doing in each one of these areas. So on the people side of things, first thing is we've got support from our executive leadership. I don't think we could have done anything if we didn't have that. So we've been very fortunate to have a lot of support from our higher leadership. Hiring the right people. And the word right, I think, is important there. We don't just want somebody to fill a chair and look at a screen. We need the right people who've got the right skills and have the right attitude to work in our environment. So that's really important. So in the SOC that we're building, or the group that we're building, we're going to have the manager, so that's me. We've got our risk compliance officer, that's Gerrit. Then we're going to have 3 security analysts, so cyber forensics and all that stuff. So right now we've got 2 in place, and hopefully the 3rd is going to be hired very soon. Once we've got the people, we need to invest in them. We've got to make sure that we keep them engaged, make sure that they have the opportunity, as an educational institution, we got to make sure that they get training. We need to make sure they're growing their skills. And that's through formal training, but also through really cool projects, right? For technology people, they want to be involved in a lot of cool stuff, and the latest and greatest. So making sure they have those opportunities. and having fun. You don't want to go to an environment, you don't want to go to work and not have a good time. So we try and keep things a little light. So we try and inject some fun in our daily work. And finally, just operationalizing that security operations center. So we're not trying to build a 24/7 SOC that we would have had at BlackBerry. We're trying to build something that fits for the university, something that's going to address the needs of the university. All right, process. Like I said, we're trying to move from ad hoc processes to documented and repeatable processes. So that includes continually updating those processes and making sure that they make sense for today. They may have made sense 2 years ago. Things have changed. We need to make sure that those processes change with them. One of the things I'm really proud of that we're doing is we're building a consultant practice within our group. We're going out to the organization and offering services to them. We're offering penetration testing. So we have support from the university leadership to say if we've had an incident, it's no longer an option. We're going in, we're doing a penetration test, we're going to tell you what we found. You got to go and fix it. But we're also offering it proactively and saying, hey, would you like us to come in? And we've had a couple of groups actually come to us and say, we want to make sure we have a good security practice and process. So we go in, we do a pen test on their systems, we give them a list of vulnerabilities, things we found, help them walk through that and help them actually resolve those issues. Dave mentioned the external account breach notifications. Again, that's really important because people reuse passwords all the time. So something key we're doing. The risk assessments and vulnerability assessments, similar to penetration testing, but the importance there is it's when people are going out to buy new products, they're going to use a new cloud service. We get involved, we help them out, we go talk to the vendor with them, ask a whole bunch of questions, making sure that they've, is this the right vendor for this product? If the vendor doesn't have good security processes, our data's at risk. That's a problem. So again, helping those groups. And again, along the same lines, we're working with procurement to make sure that security is involved early in the process so that we are an enabler. All right, technology, what everybody's interested in. So we want to build a solid foundation, but as Dave mentioned, we want to choose the tools that are the right fit for us. There may be a tool that may be higher in the Gartner chart. Doesn't matter. If it's not the right tool for us, we don't want it. We want tools that are going to fit our needs. They've got a pricing model, maybe that fits our needs, that fits our environment. And we want things that talk to each other. 1 + 1 = 3. If we've got two tools that don't talk to each other, they're not really the great fit for us. We want tools that are working together so that we get that synergy between them. So as Dave mentioned, 2 of the big projects we're working on right now are the SIM implementation and network access control. On the SIM side of things, actually both of them, it's really about visibility. It's just getting that visibility as to what's happening on our network and being able to react to it. I won't talk to every one of these things, but these are other things that are on the roadmap. As Dave mentioned, it's a 5-year roadmap, so there's a lot of time for us to put some of these things in. As things move towards the cloud, I think that's probably one of the big things on this list is we need secure storage options for our people on campus. Again, it's about options and working with them. So we can't just say, go use this. We need to say, use this for this type of material. You can maybe use this for something else. But again, we're looking at a cloud security broker to help us have visibility over that data once it's in the cloud, because we don't want to just put it in the cloud and then we lose access or we lose visibility to it. We have to always maintain that visibility. So those are all the really key things we're going to be looking at in the roadmap going forward. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Gerrit, who's going to talk about security awareness. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. I'll keep my eyes on the clock and realize that I'm the last thing between you and what looks like a very good lunch. The button. I'm the Information Security Risk and Compliance Officer. My intro to information security came way back as a student. That was a long way back in the mid-'80s when I had to explain some very unusual log entries to the director of then computing services, which was a hacking expedition that I had. But I've done information security on the white hat side for about 7 years now. So awareness efforts, we're trying to tackle both. It's a cornerstone, it's a foundational piece. Your people have to be aware both of what you're doing and the threats that they're facing. Resources that they have, people that they can contact, but also what they could be seeing. In Dave's slide, there's a large turnover on the student side. It's more than a quarter of the population changes every year. They're brand new. They're wide-eyed. They listen to official emails. If it looks like it says University of Guelph, they'll respond, they'll click. So on the staff side, as Dave said too, very decentralized. We have very strong, so our link into the staff is primarily through the departmental staff. That's our IT special interest group. And we're active with them and to them, right? So alerts from us, resources from us, but also with them. When an issue gets identified, we work with them. The student side, we have a similar, so the IT Student Advisory Committee. We have a presence both on the group that leads it, and we regularly interact with them. We've talked about our poster campaigns with them, right? So both in terms of feedback, but also how did it work? Did you see them? Where did you run into them? What do your students think? The free secure coding. So it wasn't free to us, but it was free to the community. Quite a large attendance, well received, a full day coding, both departmental staff and central staff. Very well received. You can't teach people everything in one day, but it gave them a framework. It gave them the idea to think secure coding. What is my code going to look like to somebody who thinks SQL injection and so on? We're part of the HR onboarding process for about a year and a half. Very successful. And as Dave mentioned, active involvement. So formal membership on the Research Ethics Board and active involvement with applications that come in. It's been very helpful. That's also a two-way relationship. We work together on standard operating procedures for the researchers. If you've got this type of data, do this, right? And that way we invest the time once to do it right when the first time that an application comes in. The next one simply takes that blueprint and goes forward with it. Dave mentioned the new website, so it's dynamic. It's updated daily. We've got the recent scams and phishing attempts. It's part of the awareness too, right? If you see something, first go there. So the first time that we see something on campus that is credible, we'll put it there. The reported incident, very helpful. One place, you go to infosec.guelph.ca, you've got something unusual, click, and you're there. Policies, the blog posts, and they go down, obviously. Works very well on mobile. We've worked with the web development group to make sure that that it fits the AODA standards and looks really great on mobile as long as your screen can show one of those icons, and they all can. Security awareness roadshows, Dave has mentioned it a few times. So that's in the Central University Center area where there's high student traffic, and we pick days that we know historically have high student traffic. We've done two in 2015 and decided really to make it an annual event going forward from here on in, tied to October, which is the Security Awareness Week. You can see the previous presenter in the screen. We have campus community police, so our own booth, the quiz, the engagement by the students, campus community police, and a handful of vendors that are on campus already. They don't have to sell the students anything. They don't have to convince them of anything. They are helping us with security awareness, right? But they're an established campus partner. They pay for pizza. You have to go to our booth, right? The quiz booth, and then at least 3 or 4 of the other booths before you get to collect your pizza. And so it's a worthwhile treat or reward at the end. But that's very important to the students. They save themselves a free meal and they learn in the process. The poster campaign, really simple, effective messages. They're on bulletin boards, the Branyan Cube. We have 4 different poster runs per month, and I've shown 2 different months. This year, we're tying them to the EDUCAUSE monthly security calendar. Very helpful. They are literally everywhere. You'll find them in bathrooms and stuff too while you're on a momentary lapse of. Few other successes. So really the InfoSec brand, right? So tying all those pieces together. As I mentioned, the security calendar that we're using for this year. We've had decent traction with the SAN CIS top 20 critical security controls. People are starting to say, oh yeah, that's security control number 1. Of course, we've got to inventory our hardware and so on. The bi-weekly posts that we started late last year, helpful too, but people have to go there still, right? So awareness, and I dread to say it again because every single person has said it, but awareness, there's no one single silver bullet in awareness either, right? You need to hit people in multiple ways. We had one anecdotal incident with that IT student advisory committee where we said, okay, have you seen any of these messages? And they all did, which was amazing. That they are student leaders, but it was amazing that they saw it. So where did you see it? And there was one in the bathroom, one in the Brandon Cube, one had seen it here, one had seen it there, right? So every one of those had seen it in a different way. So you can't just focus your awareness on one particular avenue. The notification with the departmental staff, and we do have security awareness training, and with management push, information security can't do that, but with the IT management, we had a 100% completion of the central IT staff of the security awareness course. But that does require a push. It's about an hour, it's about an hour and 10 minutes to fully finish that course. You can't lead a horse to water and make him drink, but managers apparently can make their staff do quite a bit. And that was it. I tried to speak fast. I think we have 5 minutes. I've been looking for a sign. I haven't seen a sign, but there's a couple of minutes for questions from any of us.
A number of new resources basically for this new program, and what was the secret to getting that kind of support?
Dave's probably the best one to answer that one.
So great question, and I think there's a couple of things. So prior to my arrival at university, there actually was a couple of significant data breaches. One of them was right in the central IT organization, involved some laptops that were unencrypted being taken that caused certainly some embarrassment for, at the time, our new chief librarian and CIO. So that was one thing. There was some, we got a bit of visibility. We did see some breaches. When I came on board, really a couple of things happened. I think having some credibility when you're talking to senior admin and some stories to tell helps. And having some credibility around what I did at BlackBerry helped build some trust with the senior admin, the board, our VP of Finance in particular. And I joke about this last thing. So when I actually got the budget signed off, it was actually a pretty quick conversation with our VP of Finance. And a couple of things I said to him. I said, BlackBerry probably spent about 25, 30 million on security. And I said, I'm giving you a deal here. I only need about 5. And then I looked him in the eye and I said, you know what? I couldn't tell you if your finance systems are actually secure today. So it was about a 5-minute conversation, and then a week later we got approval of our budget. So certainly having some stories, though, I think are critical. And that's really going to help us moving forward. So some incidents happened before I arrived, which helped sort of drive that we needed to bring somebody on board who could figure all this out for us. Having some credibility certainly helped. But we're going to have more stories to tell. Getting the visibility, we're going to start discovering things. And I think that, I talked at the beginning about driving change around the culture of higher ed and how it's done. Security is going to be a big driver around that. We're even with our limited visibility, and we're going to get a lot more over the next 12 months. We're starting to build up some stories. And when you sit down with faculty and senior admin and leaders, and if you have some good stories to tell, they're going to buy in and adopt, because it's not about, as Steve mentioned, it's about being an enabler, not an obstacle, right? Security has to be as transparent as possible and enable people. You can't prevent people. And you know, this was one of the challenges we had at BlackBerry. I couldn't prevent software development from getting software releases out on time. I had to figure out a way to work with them to make sure that what they're doing is protected and safe. Same thing with our faculty and researchers, making sure that the research you're doing is not being tampered with, it's safe and protected. Making sure our students and their parents can feel when they send their kids to the University of Guelph, they can feel that we're doing everything we can in our power to protect students and their privacy. And that's what it's all about, right? And if you have reasonable conversations with people, they get it. And I think in some ways we've been very fortunate that we have a very supportive board. We have a couple of VPs of risk, I think one current at a major institution and one former, that sit on the board, so they get it from a risk perspective. Our VP of Finance has recently had risk added to his title. So I think those are all good things. Every little bit helps, right? And just putting together a sound business case. And I think what helped as well, even though we asked for a lot of money, from the original plan and anticipation, I actually eliminated a couple of roles. And I said, you know what, we don't need 7 new people, we need 5. And the reason we need 5 is we're going to invest in some smart technology that's going to automate a few things for us. And that helped build some credibility that, you know what, you're looking at spending in the best interest, understanding you're not a tier 1 financial organization, you're higher ed, and getting that money is, it's not easy to do. But I think stories, having some credibility, have a good plan, certainly helps.